Welcome to Founder Radio. I'm your host, Hugo. In this podcast, you'll hear in-depth conversations with the globe's most exciting company founders. We'll talk about their ideas, their successes, their challenges, and their learnings along the way. At Founder Radio, we celebrate founders, and we believe that innovative founders are critical to deal with the challenges humans face. They are society's explorers and work in uncertainty to expand our practical knowledge each and every day. Building something from scratch requires creativity, intelligence, conviction, and endurance. Get inspired and learn from those that are changing the world. Hello everyone, thanks for listening to Founder Radio. It's Hugo, good to have you back. Please follow this podcast if you like what you're hearing to get automatic updates and tune in for today's episode. Really excited about our guest today. We're talking to Kees Aarts. Kees is the founder of Protix, and Protix is a multinational manufacturer of insect ingredients for both animal feed and human consumption. And the company operates the world's largest insect factory in Bergen op Zoom in the Netherlands. Kees, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
You're an aerospace engineer and an ex-McKinseyan, and you founded Protix more than 14 years ago. Can you describe Protix in your own words?
Well, Protix is basically a company that has studied nature and tries to bring back natural solutions in our global food system and tries to balance our global food system back in balance with nature. And what does it mean? All over the world, we produce a lot of foods. We use a lot of lands. We harvest a lot of fish. And it's just not sustainable. We are overexploiting, polluting, or simply changing lands into artificial production areas. If we wish to have a future where nature and biodiversity are part of our life and ecosystem, we do need new solutions. So there are big transformations needed, like the energy transition, but there's also food and protein transition needed. And in nature, there are these little critters called insects, and without them, the world would just be a mess, right? They're needed for two reasons. They clean up. They take all the food waste that nature produces, and they themselves are a very vital and important source of nutrition for all animals that need to grow fast and that are young and need to build their immune system. So basically, insects as a solution to upcycle waste into high-quality nutrition is already there. We just didn't use it in our global food system. And that's where Protix came in. So we are a pioneering company that has developed the end-to-end solutions and technologies and software and everything that is related to producing insects at scale, to produce sustainable ingredients for feed and food applications, and to help reduce our global footprint of whatever we eat and consume.
That's awesome, Kees. And could you, for the audience, go more into depth as to what that entails? And maybe the right way of framing it is, if I think about the largest insect manufacturing plant in the world, what goes in and what comes out?
So eventually, what you'll see, it's a very big box. It's more than 1.5 hectares, more than 15,000 square meters. And every day we have trucks coming in with food waste and byproducts. Think about, you have your little carrots or your French fries. There's always leftovers or leftovers from the starch production or flour production. So all these leftovers come in. And then we have an end-to-end system where under one roof, we produce eggs from this black soldier fly, which is a fly larvae that as a fly doesn't eat. So it means that as a larvae, it needs to store all its nutrition to grow, to pupate, to hatch, to fly, and to lay eggs. And these larvae can eat almost all kinds of food waste, whether it's wet or degrading. It's basically anything we offer to them, they can eat and they can grow on it. And then we do that in very controlled environments. So everything is controlled, from the breeding to the egg collection, to the harvesting, to the growth, to the climate settings. And then we bring them to a processing where we separate the larvae from the residue. And then basically we have two raw materials: live larvae that we process into protein meals and oils. And we have a residue called frass that is really good for soil nutrition. And then at the back end of the factory, those two trucks drive out. So high quality ingredients for animals, in the future also humans and plants.
Could you tell us more about where those trucks go?
Sure. So in the end, you have to realize that everything you eat and all parts of the food system are connected. There's no such thing as, for instance, just plants or just animals or just pet food, right? They're all connected. Everything we produce has byproducts, they go into somewhere. So there's this massive global footprint, and there are these huge groups of consumers, right? So the animals we love, like pets and cats and dogs, the animals we eat, like pigs, chicken, and fish, ourselves are a big consumer, direct, but also plants, right? So there's a lot of compost and residue that is needed for soil improvement and soil nutrition for plant growth. So all these, we call this participants of the food system, they're all connected. So that's why we don't really say like we produce for pet food or we produce for food, right? What we do is we produce ingredients like protein meals, like beautiful, tasty, good smelling powders, oils and raw materials that can go into all kinds of diets and formulations. And it's up to the consumer how they would love to consume that. So whether they would like to buy sustainable, healthy food for their dogs and cats that can help reduce pain when they get old or improve their fur, or recently even something really beautiful, make more kissable dogs, because our proteins are so nutritious that they're very healthy for the gut of the dog, and it improves their breath. So there are all these natural, logical consequences of bringing these great natural ingredients from insects into the food system. So these trucks, they leave our facility and they go to customers in pet food, in aquaculture, which is feed for fish like salmon, to feed companies, and also to soil enrichment.
Got it. And we're going to talk a bit more about insect protein in general as well. I would love to go deep with you on that. For now, a couple of more questions on Protix. I think you have approximately 200 people working at the company right now. What kinds of things do they do? Could you give us a bit of an overview?
The beauty of Protix is basically the broadest range of crazy pioneers you can think of, right? Like we have super talented and educated operators. We have people that are PhD in product development. We have people that do marketing and communication. We have R&D, people that create new research in nutrition. We have a genetic program to improve the larvae genetics. People that create a solid foundation of the company. We have engineers who develop new solutions. So eventually we're a company. We have software developers to make control software for the factory that basically would rival advanced algorithms that we call AI today. We have developed the entire category, basically. So operations, engineering, research, and commerce have all been working together the last 15 years by generating data and experience that they all look at and then improve solutions to produce better, solutions to produce cheaper, solutions to create better and high quality products. So it's basically the broadest range of pioneers with a can-do mentality that are continuously curious, engage actively in developing the company, but also are very active in managing these roadmaps, what we call. So yes, we always try to deliver short-term results, high quality products for customers that create a profit margin. But at the same time, we're continuously developing these long-term roadmaps to be the best now, tomorrow, and in the far future.
Could you describe a couple of breakthroughs in that path of developing the category? It's not just catching insects, so to say, and farm them, right? Like it sounds like you have to go through a lot of technical breakthroughs to actually get where you are today.
Yeah, so eventually there are a range of breakthroughs. So I would say the biggest breakthrough starts with the people committing to work together at each other's interface, so that there's no such thing as an engineer that can do without experiences from an operator. There's no such thing as an operator who can improve productivity without researchers testing new stuff. There's no such thing as researchers that can test stuff without engineers, right? So if they would sit in their own isolation, nothing would happen. So breakthrough number one is finding the right pioneers that commit to collaborating across those interfaces. The second breakthrough is of course more on the biological side. Things like the first time we did control breeding and mass timing of transferring from a larvae to a cocoon, or the first new improved strain that can convert waste better for weight gain. So there are all these biological breakthroughs that were necessary. And eventually another breakthrough is really that Protix has been at the initiator and at the foundation of creating a deregulation roadmap on a European level to really make the global food system and the European food system from linear to circular. So eventually we had a super linear system, right? We transform lands into agriculture. We then extract nutrition. By the way, most lands are overexploited, right? Because there's no natural nutrition anymore. It's just chemical fertilizers and seeds and pesticides. And then we harvest from oceans, and then we eat, and then whatever's left we discard. So it was linear. We are a solution to make it circular and create a pathway to low footprint, no footprint protein and nutrition. And that's a huge breakthrough that we got the European Commission so far to work with us in 3 to 4, 5 years. So eventually it took about 7 years to create these openings and to create this new legislation for this new category and product to exist. And that's something really Protix has been at the basis of. And we had an ecosystem of strong parties and people and ambassadors that helped us. And then, of course, I can name hundreds of technological breakthroughs. We've got more than 300 patents. But I think the biggest breakthroughs start with a culture of collaboration around engineering operations and research, going deep into the biologicals, understanding the underlying metabolic energy and transformation from waste to wealth. And thirdly, the existence of this category in the regulatory and legislative arena. But we had to create all of that. I mean, the first 5 years, I wouldn't even say this was a company. Like me and my co-founder were just trying stuff. Only recently, I would say it's more becoming a company.
Got it. Yeah, you got a long way. That's impressive in terms of breakthroughs. And Kees, what's the status of the company? And I mean that a bit from an investor's perspective, like financial sustainability. Are you still raising funds? Are you beyond that? Like, what does the company look like from that perspective?
So over the years, we've raised quite a lot of capital. We needed all the capital, of course, to invest, to develop these innovative roadmaps, to create the category. And we had a lot of trust from early investors, friends, family, early stage investors like Rabobank, Aquaspark, you name it. We're by no means the company that has raised the most capital. There are companies in our sector that raised 3, 4, 5 times more money with a lot more government support than we did. We also got government support, but it's like pennies compared to bucks in some other countries. From day one, I think we've been more like the Calvinistic farmer, trying to turn every penny into value, whether it's IP or product capacity. The biggest transformation was building from going from your test to demo to commercial pilots to the factory we have up and running right now. We are turning truck into truck out positive gross margins. We even already transformed it in positive EBITDA margins, which is a big thing. There are very few companies in the agricultural value chain that actually create a new ingredient and create a financial upside on top of it. So very proud of that, and which is testament to the long-term commitment by a lot of people in the company to continuously drive down the cost and continuously create the value proposition in the market so that the margin in between is created. But of course, we're still capital dependent for growth, but far more financially resilient than 5-6 years ago. And so turning really euros into results into financial performance into profits is the next step.
Yeah, amazing. And all this is very impressive, long list of achievements and breakthroughs. I imagine it hasn't been that way from the very start. Could you take us back to the first year? I already heard you quoting, it was like eat shit and keep going. I'm sure there's a lot to tell about that first year.
Yeah, so that quote will haunt me, but I think the sad reality, it is truth. I would argue it could be that never stops, right? If you're really creating something, if you're really building something new, a company, you're basically constantly in transformation. And I don't know if you know the morning curve, right? Like where it is just very, like transformation is very painful, right? You start with nothing, you have to create something. There are always believers and disbelievers. In the category of believers, you've got true promoters and ambassadors. But in the category of disbelievers, you also have true people and organizations that try to block you or inhibit you from delivering the result and the ambition and the vision you have. So, and that's aside just the normal issues any company has, right? It's things happen, right? You've got setbacks, you've got people leaving, you've got the wrong people in the wrong place, you've got setbacks resulting into potential negativity. All of that is just normal practice in normal companies already, right? Like a normal business already needs to make sure that you always have more positives than negatives, but there's no such thing as no negatives. There is a thing with no positives, but there's no such thing as no negatives, right? So you always need to invest more in creating that positive outlook, that culture of embracing failure, but persevering and celebrating successes. And part of that is just eat shit and keep going. But part of that is also creating a culture of just ignoring the negativities of failure a little bit more than celebrating the successes. It's far easier to have a mentality of accepting failure than to expect successes. Because again, failures are a common denominator. They're continuous, they'll always be there, and sadly, they sometimes get much bigger. Successes are not guaranteed. So expecting successes and is the fastest way to disappointment.
How did you deal with those setbacks, especially in the early days where you probably had setbacks, but it was harder to see where the company would go 14 years later?
Yeah, but that's easier. It's harder now to accept. It's now harder to deal with failures. So in the beginning, to be honest, failures are almost like a design principle, right? Okay, we're innovating, let's fail fast and just learn and keep going. Because we don't know where this is ending. Therefore, it's basically all uncertain. So it's almost easier to accept all those setbacks and failures. Now, it's crystallizing into a company that it has a very solid embedding and role also in communities, right? So our demonstration facility in Dongen, everybody knew it's only for a short time, right? We're there for trying and testing, and once we're done, we're going to build a factory somewhere else. But Bergen op Zoom is a factory with a 20+ year horizon, where you have a role in the community, you have a role to play for the people that work there, that I hope always come to the factory with pleasure and excitement. And so the responsibilities get higher and larger, the role in a community. I think as an entrepreneur, a true entrepreneur is a lot more than just in, out, and profit calculation. It's also the role you have in the community and how you take care of the people in the community around you, and vice versa, how the people in the community take care of the company. So I would say I find it almost harder to deal with setbacks and failures these days than I did 10 years ago.
And how do you do it? Like whenever there's a big one, what's your mental model to get through that?
Well, there's a lot more. There's a mental model, there's people around you, there's resilience you build up over time. I think the most important one is making sure you're not exhausted. I have 3 kids, I have a great wife, I've got great friends and in the ecosystem and also a very trustworthy board and team. So it's getting much safer and better and easier to handle setbacks because there are a lot more people around us that are part of it. But you also grow a different skin and a different mode of reaction. But also, in fairness, sometimes also harder to deal with it.
Got it. And when we start looking at Protix future, what are important next steps for the next couple of years for Protix?
So recently we raised a ton of capital to grow our business and to invest in the US with a partner for a very large factory. So now we're on the phase of internationalization. So our solution is scalable. We know what to build, we know how to produce. We have all the technology, the IP and the software and the people skills to design, build, and run a factory. To reduce a bit of the capital risk, we do it in partnerships, so that we don't need to raise all the capital ourselves. And then building an international company with stable base of operations is the first next step. The real reason to do that is because it would create that stable financial foundation, so that the assets we have in Bergen-op-Zoom, the US, and Europe collectively would deliver the cash flow for continuous innovation and growth. So financial resilience for the people in the company is the outcome, so that people have a more stable and long-term perspective, that they know where the company is heading, that there is international perspective for growth and excitement. That's the outcome. The action and the how-to is by expanding our capacity in US and Europe through large-scale assets. So basically factories around 3 to 4 times bigger than Bergen-op-Zoom.
Gigafactories.
Yeah, the grub factory. So basically, yeah, and where we take food waste, we produce proteins and oils and help reduce the footprint in CO2, land, and water for every kilogram we sell. This is our objective, right? So our human activity, we don't tell consumers what to do and what to eat. We believe that is something I believe we should never do. It always creates more negatives than positives. But whatever is consumed to produce, we hope that it is less destructive, more balanced with nature, and lower in footprint in terms of CO2, land, and water. So that's by expanding capacity, our impact will grow larger and our financial resilience will grow better.
Do you have a certain goal in mind, say 10 years from now, in terms of the impact on the footprint and in terms of replacing existing sources of food?
Yes, so eventually we believe that this industry could be displacing a very significant portion of the fish meal, palm oil, and soy production. So eventually fish meal, palm oil production, and soy meal production are like these massive destructors of natural resources, right? So it's either exploiting the oceans, it's land degradation or pollution, and we want to get rid of a massive share of that, in range of millions and millions of tons of proteins and oils that we extract from food waste. So if you think about that, for every ton of oil we sell is 94% lower in CO2 and water use than palm oil, like for like. So every ton of protein, it's 85% lower CO2, land and water use versus soy. It's just a massive, and it's a very concentrated production because the natural tendency of insects is to grow really close together. So our factory is a 12-story high vertical farm. We basically enhance natural behavior, and then we extract the proteins and oils by processing the insects into protein meals and oils. And every ton we produce is 80 to 90, and in the next expansion, even 95+% more efficient.
That's amazing.
Those are massive steps.
Yeah.
And those are the impacts we need in the global food system. So in 10 years from now, we will be a very large producer, but the global insect industry can have the potential of millions of tons. That's billions of kilograms of sustainable ingredients that are part of our global food system.
That's amazing. I was just about to ask you for some numbers on the impact of insect protein. You read my mind. Would love to go a bit deeper on that, as I'm sure you did for the last 14 years and before. Could you explain a bit more about why it is that insects are so much more efficient from a footprint perspective in terms of generating protein? Why is that, biologically speaking?
So the evolution of insects has led to them being category. It's like, where do you find larvae of insects? I can ask the question back. Like, where does one find the larvae of flies and beetles and so on, or worms. In the pear and apples falling from trees and degrading. It's in the waste basically of the global food system. So it's like this crew, trillions of small animals all around the world that are cleaning up food waste. But they're evolutionary, specialized to do this. So it's their entire metabolic system that just upcycles poor material, basically.
And is that where insects achieve their efficiency, by converting food waste, or is it also in going from that food waste to the end product of protein?
It's a triple whammies, right? It's using the material that is less nutritious, right? It's not for nothing food waste and byproducts. It's the way they consume it, so they can absorb almost everything. And there is this interaction between extraction and conversion on a fatty acid and amino acid level. But them together makes them extremely efficient.
Yeah, got it.
Upcycle from waste to wealth.
And is insect protein different from other proteins?
Yeah, but eventually our proposition is a powder and an oil, and it's the composition of amino acids and digestible proteins, and in the oils, the composition of fatty acids and digestible lipids that make it particularly interesting. So let's look at a chicken. Right? A chicken is not a vegetarian. A chicken in nature, and all birds eat insects. That's why we see a lot of benefits by reintroducing insects as a feed. We see chickens becoming more healthy. We see them grow better. We see them with less foot sore leisures, which is an issue in chicken farming. We see it in piglets. They also eat insects and grubs in nature. They have less diarrhea if we add our oil. So there's all these natural behavior improvement and health promoting benefits by applying our ingredients as part of the diets and the recipes.
Could you tell us more about that? Because I recently had an interesting conversation on the difference between animal proteins and vegetable proteins. But I'm sure you know a lot about how insect proteins compare to that. Could you list the benefits versus animal proteins?
So eventually, I mean, our protein, meal, and oil are just very healthy ingredients. There's this freshness index because we harvest and process so quickly. It's even fresher than most protein powders and meats and fish that consumers produce. Insect proteins and oils are very healthy and tasty ingredients, but they're powder and they're an oil. So we typically don't consume it that way, right? So we typically consume whole foods or meats and seeds and pulses. So that's why we see insect as an ingredient for food application more in the future, but definitely very exciting propositions and healthy propositions to be expected. Your question on proteins of animals versus plants. I mean, eventually there's a whole range of products and foods that one can eat and consume. It is known that you need to do more effort and invest more effort in if you're on plant and seeds only diets, right? You need to put more effort in making sure that it's a whole and nutritious diet. Meats are, when it comes to that, very clean and very quick and very effective proteins and maybe not so intensive and expensive red meat consumption. But on average, if you just stick to the 50 to 60 grams of protein per day and you mix it a little bit between meat and plants, then you're all good. And I basically also believe it should be with a low meat, high plant diet, which I consume as well. But from a health perspective, insect proteins and oils could fit in really quickly, really effective. But it's a new ingredient. And anything new on the plate is a slow adoption, right? It doesn't matter which part of the plate, whether it's a new vegetable or a new meat or a new ingredient, it's always slow.
The stomach is a conservative organ.
Yeah, of course. I mean, we're creatures of habits. I tend to like what my grandmother and mother cooked because what they cook is good, right? Even though if now in hindsight, me and my wife, I believe, probably cook a little bit more diverse and more tasty, but still I like and love whatever my grandmother and mother cooked, right? Like we're creatures of habits. Foods are cultural, historical, personal, but from a healthy and tasty perspective, there's an exciting future because there will be a lot more ingredients and foods coming from fungi, insects, seeds, plants, meats, you name it. There's all kinds of innovation ongoing.
Have you ever looked into the history of humans eating insects? Because insects are new, but they've also been around for millions of years. So did we ever eat them and stop doing that? Did we never get started? What's the history there, and why is it the way it is, you think?
All foods have a historical and cultural components. There are areas in the world where insects were part of the diet. You do see, however, that whatever was historical and cultural goes a little bit through a modernization and then appreciation curve. So we never use the arguments, for instance, in China and Africa, they eat insects, therefore it's normal, therefore you should as well. That's not the case, right? It's the same as saying, well, in the Netherlands and France, they eat the heads of a cow, and therefore everybody should eat it. Or, I mean, the ears of a pig or the roots of a certain vegetable. I mean, foods are historical and cultural and personal. Modernization typically brings that people eat more and eat more high nutrition, more meats, more vegetables, more fats. However, and also more fast food and more processed food. And then you get appreciation again. And that's when identity and cultural goes back to, okay, but what were our original vegetables, our original meats, our local products? And then you go back to appreciating again that, and that's what we now see in some areas in the world. We see insects coming back to the diet out of cultural appreciation, past or historical and local presence. So that part, so innovation is fueling this excitement and diversification of our foods, but also identity and cultural appreciation is also fueling further diversification of our foods. On the other hand, we have climate change, who is negatively affecting a lot of things, right? So olive oil production or seeds and pulses, I mean, intensified rains and droughts, intensified heats and colds, that will all have an effect on our food system as well.
Yep. If I or the audience would want to eat anything with Protix ingredients in them, what kind of products are in supermarkets or available to consumers right now?
Yeah, so there's quite some products. I think the total retail value of products that consumers could buy for their pets or for themselves was exceeding, I believe it was like almost 100 million euro last year alone. Of course, we're only an ingredient supplier to our customers that make formulations and then to wholesale and retail. But for consumers, like we got eggs in the supermarket where the chickens were fed with less soy, more insects. That results into more natural behavior and healthy chickens. Actually more tasty eggs as well. We had some blind testing by TV stations that actually the Ur egg is what it's called, were loved better than others. And we have shrimps coming in, hitting the supermarkets soon of Albert Heijn, where fresh shrimps, the non-frozen, are fed with less fish meal and more insect protein. It actually also resulted in more healthy shrimps and less pressure on overfishing. And we expect also some salmon to hit the market soon. And we're working with companies in Norway on that.
Amazing. And is this on the packaging yet? Like, could people go to the supermarket and then pick out, for example, the shrimps that are insect protein fed versus others?
Some yes, some don't. So it's always on the packaging whether insects, of course, are part of it. I mean, it's no secret. And it's also part of the transparency and also actually something that we believe should make you feel good because you're actually helping this food system become more natural with more tasty and healthy ingredients that make sense and reduce the CO2 and water footprint. And some will actually have our Protix name and logo on it. So we're really at the cusp of transforming. But the easiest way is to really go to online and go to search for pet food with insect protein. And we already have more than 200 products with our customers in the market. And that's where you would have an immediate effect. Like it's more healthy for your cats and dogs and more sustainable. So, of course, having a social companion in your family, I mean, great. I mean, they're fantastic. But they also have a large footprint, right? So to do it, love your animal, love the planet, to definitely look for pet foods with insects.
Yeah, awesome and great. Everybody can get started right away. In case you started this company in the Netherlands, I'm not sure how much of a deliberate choice that was at the time, and you lived in the country, etc. Your environment gives you a lot of opportunities, but maybe also holds you back in other ways. I'd love to discuss a little bit your experiences when it comes to that. Do you think the Netherlands is a good place to start a business and to grow a business?
That's a very good and, of course, timely question. For us, it was a good place to start the company. The intense and close by infrastructure of the different actors, same as like within the company, would like engineering, operation, research, and commerce to work together intensely. There are these social and societal elements like knowledge institutes, companies, willing and supportive government officials that are also really close together, especially in Brabant when it comes to agricultural and technological innovation. So being in Brabant, in the Netherlands, in agriculture and innovation and technology advancement is a good place to start. We should not get complacent, right? It's not because companies like ASML, companies like Protix have the most IP, the most technological lead, is that we will keep leading and stay ahead in a global context, right? The sheer number of talents coming from university in Asia, the sheer number of government support programs in the US for innovation and sustainability are just so huge and so big that staying is a whole different question. That's aside the culture, right? So the infrastructure in the Netherlands to start a company is good. It's more challenging to stay and expand. Culturally, I'm really a little bit on the fence. It's a bit of a love and hate relationship, to be honest. I've got great ecosystem of friends and ambassadors that have large businesses, large family businesses that have established world-renowned brands that are great support whenever I have questions or challenges or daunting topics to expand and grow a company and create a solid organization and so on. At the same time, the broader culture sometimes feels like the old saying, kop boven het maaiveld will be cut off. I have to admit that does feel like that way often, right? Like, of course, you need media for creating momentum and positivity. But if you fail, it does feel very scary. Right? Like I know companies that have gone bankrupt where the founders and CEOs truly have. I mean, it's we should celebrate rather than punish. And I do think that the culture and the balance of coming out on top is not in favor of a founder or a CEO of a high risk scaling growth company. It's potentially, I would almost argue it's potentially too risky on a personal level to do this.
And do you mean that the media is overly critical on entrepreneurs?
It's hard to pinpoint, but I really understand if I talk to a successful entrepreneur or a person that says, look, why would I even bother trying to be successful in the Netherlands? Because the chance that you're eventually going to be kicked down is just very high. And we can easily do this abroad, out of the limelight of the Dutch culture and attention. It's not blaming a part of it. It's not blaming media or blaming institutions, but it's the collective culture where I would say it is too much in favor of the low risk sideline people than to the high risk inner ring people.
Got it.
I was at a small event with founders and CEOs of companies in the circular economy that develop hardware and technology and solutions to actually change, right? So not investing in companies. I mean, on the investment side, it's easy to say, yeah, well, we run the financial risk. It's only part of the total risk scope that leaders and the team that builds the company run. They run all the risk, personal risk, the mental risk, the physical risk, the reputational risk, the financial risk, contractual risk. I see way too many CEOs and founders being tied up in agreements that are just eventually, I mean, what's the chance that they will end on top and benefiting from the positive clauses and agreements. And then if you move to the financial side, what's the chance of them having no downside risk and exposure is also very high. So it's just, I would say, starting company, yes, I had fantastic ecosystem partners and ambassadors, grateful to all of them, and they know who they are if I say this. Do I doubt the culture, the societal infrastructure to further nourish and nurture this type of risk takers and companies for them to grow nationally and internationally? Me saying this sounds like I want to be celebrated, but it's not the case. It's not the case. People who know me, actually, it's not that. I'm not here to want to be on the stage and to be celebrated. I just don't want to be punished if I fail. Like, I love failure. I embrace failure. Actually, I love failure a lot more than the successes, but it's my choice to do so, right? It's if I would now, I think this is where my conscious mental blocker and naivety kicks in, and it's a conscious choice to be naive in that. The reality is, it's not really a choice to embrace failure, because in the Netherlands, you'll be labeled a fucking failure if you fail. If you truly let yourself be influenced by that fear, I can tell you, this is way too difficult to keep doing this.
What's your root cause analysis of that part of the culture?
We have to go way back, but it's the Netherlands. I think a couple of root causes. The Netherlands is a very rich country, so I can relate to the fat and complacent remark by Peter Wenning. And when you're rich, there's this great book. It's called The Rules of Class. And the book basically categorizes the poor, the middle class, and the wealth. And the book looks for what are the values-based drivers for behavior. There are two interesting insights from that. One is that the values that drive behavior are distinct in the three categories, but they don't overlap. And that's a very big problem, because it's like Venn diagrams, right? It's like, do you understand the other person? The circles need to overlap somewhere. And there was a Centraal Planbureau report like that. Poor and the rich don't meet each other anymore. That's a very big problem. If you have different value drivers of values behavior that do not overlap, that's a very, very big problem. And then so that book is life-changing, right? It gives a lot of explanation to the things you see around us. By the way, I understand why a lot of people behave the way they do. I understand why we have the results from the election last time. It's a consequence of things that happened, of differentiating behavior and so on, and different values. But if you then zoom in on the rich and the wealth, compared to the world, we have, of course, a lot of our middle class is wealth compared to the rest of the world. And protection and security and not losing wealth is more important than risking something for upside in the future. So I'm driven by taking risk. I love it. I love it because it creates change, transformation, it creates innovation. As a result, it can also lead to wealth in the future. Because if I create a solid business, if I create wealth for employees and shareholders, I will have a part of that as well. If I were to be a wealthy person from the start, I definitely think I wouldn't have done it, because the amount of risk that I will lose it all is just way higher. The chance of succeeding and earning more. So the root cause, I think, is we're a wealthy country. We have a lot of money, but that doesn't flow fast and easy. So there's a lot of money in the Netherlands, but it just flows slowly. Why? Because slow is safer, right? It's slow tends to protect your downside risk, limits your upside potential, but it protects your downside risk. So I think we have a culture there. But then and now it gets to the crux. How do you feel when you took a slow decision, right? You took time for something and you made a conscious decision and you made a conscious investment, and then you lose money. Then you feel really bad. You feel much worse than losing the same money quickly.
And when
It's
you've
like
made 10
Kahneman,
decisions
right?
and then lose a bit of money on 2 out of 10, right?
It's Kahneman. It's thinking fast and slow.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
and
great
I
book.
see that back in a lot of things. I see that back in way investors think about boards and governance, and it's so often revolving around let's take it slow and let's be argumentative and let's be very diligent. It's all true. It's often a failure that it reduces the risk. The risk is the same, right? The risk of this company succeeding doesn't change by taking a slow decision. What does change by taking a slow decision is that if you then lose, typically people get very disappointed, very angry, or even worse, blaming. And this is then, again, more a cultural aspect.
Got it.
So I think there's a root cause. I think, first of all, we are a rich nation. I understand that a lot of people don't feel it and experience that way. It's terrible that young people cannot buy a house. That results in dissatisfiers. That results in a lot of stress. So we need to do something about it. We need to spread the wealth more evenly now, much more important than ever. But we are a rich nation and money doesn't flow easily. And we tend to love slow decision making. There's a good to that. I think Protix is a leading company because we took a step-by-step approach, creating enough proof points for the next step. So compared to some of our colleagues in the field, they might see us also as a slow company, but we're leading. So there are goods to it, but there are also bads to it when it comes to punishing failures. And I think a part of punishing failures is a result of the way we approach risk.
I'd love to add something to that and keen your thoughts on it. I'd also add that the risk of messing something up and as an investor maybe losing money is very tangible, whereas the risk of missing an opportunity is not that tangible, right? And you can not have that on your radar, so to say, whereas the risk of immediately messing something up and making a wrong decision, losing money, or maybe steering a company in the wrong direction is much more tangible and direct. Does that make sense to you as well?
So the classic prevention is less celebratory, right? Like it's hard for me to compliment you for preventing a failure, but it's missing an opportunity is a direct result of slow processes, more focused on play not to lose rather than play to win.
Yeah.
And play not to lose is more our culture. And why do a lot of people love the US culture when it comes to entrepreneurship? There are a lot of stuff that are not even as close to appreciating that I would appreciate in the European and Dutch context. But from an entrepreneurial investment, a startup and growth company perspective, the US is about play to win, which fits much better with risk and opportunity than play not to lose. And I'm not saying anything new. I mean, I'm not advocating something new. There are more than enough people acknowledging this. It's just if something is cultural and if there are deep entrenched values differences that don't overlap, then it's difficult to change that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Hence, I understand why then people move their company somewhere else.
Yeah. In case you're a self-proclaimed footprintarian, you even say that everybody is one. You wrote a book aptly named The Footprintarian. Could you explain your theory there and how it helps us?
Yeah, so sadly, it's not yet translated in the UK, so in English language. So the footprintarian and the footprintarian, it's a new word. We actually got to be the word of the month at Van Dalen.
Ah, amazing. And it's in there.
Yeah, so it's that was a fun one, right? So to actually make up a word.
Which is the Dutch dictionary for those
Yes.
listening, not aware of Van Dalen.
But throughout the years, me and a lot of people in the company, we are driven by creating a sustainable future where we live in a world around us that is not hostile, but is supporting and that we live in balance with nature. I personally also get annoyed if somebody then takes the moralistic approach and tells you what not to do. And throughout the years, it struck me that there is a difference between having an opinion and starting to use that opinion to tell people what to do. Right? The first one is you use to inform and excite and motivate and inspire people. The second one is to force and tell and dictate people. Let's take an example, vegetarianism. I mean, there are people literally against vegetarianism or veganism. Like, how insane is that? Right? Like, I literally don't know any vegetarian or vegan people that does it with a bad intent. Right? I don't know any of them. And still, what they advocate, what they do, can create people that, out of protest, buy bigger chunks of meat and throw it on the barbecue. Like, how insane is that, right? Somehow, particularly, I mean, in mobility, you see it. Like, people with a gas-powered car can say things about people that drive an EV car that is just personal. And I go like, why do people make things personal, right? It shouldn't be. It's not personal, but apparently it is personal. It should not be personal. And then, so, okay, after discussion and thinking, I feel like, what is the most neutral thing? So my thought experiment started with, what if a person out of positivity says, I'm going to stop eating meat and eat plant because it's better for the environment? Great, whatever, right? Personal choice, support. If someone else says, no, I still love meat, okay, fine, you heard this argument, do something with it. But what if now somebody comes with a piece of meat that is more sustainable than plant? Should the person move back? And if the person moves back, what do you think happens with the person that kept eating meat? I think a lot of people will start using this negative joke approach, like, oh, you're changing back, see, you're a hypocrite, right? Like there's this negativity about choices, which is saddening. So what is the most neutral area? Like, eventually we have a footprint. Literally, everybody has a footprint. Everyone has desires and needs in terms of products, services, goods, experiences, and foods. Even the minimalistic person who wants to do yoga in a silent room in Bali is a consumer that wants to do yoga in a silent room on Bali. And if they then advocate, yeah, but I don't eat meat and I drink tea, which is better for the environment, I'm sorry, you're still a consumer that loves yoga in a silent room on Bali that happens to choose low coffee, low meat diets, right? It's your choice, love it, probably get inspired that I should do more yoga in a silent room as well. But shouldn't we just all strive to do whatever we like to do at the lowest possible footprint? So that if you get the choice to do something, but you get the choice to do it at a lower footprint than another choice, I hope you choose for the low footprint. And that's, so it's like, I believe that we should all continuously optimize. As a society, there is no single solution, right? Like, and by the way, also another fun fact. Every individual thinks that there are these blocks of change generationally, right? Like Gen Z, Gen Y, whatever. Like there are these 20 years blocks of change. But if every person thinks that, there are no blocks, right? It's a continuum. There are no blocks of transformational technology change or whatever, ecotourism or consumer habitual changes. Every person, every generation, every society is in a continuum of change, in a continuum of advancement, in a continuum of setbacks sometimes. I mean, I don't want to live in certain areas currently because now they're in a continuum of setbacks and fear and potential war. But it's all continuum. So how do you optimize? The idea emerged of footprintarianism, where as a consumer, you try to optimize your consumption at the lowest possible footprint. And as a society and a company, you try to offer solutions and frameworks and tax structures and products and services and goods with an ever decreasing footprint. So footprintarianism is there to merge and create this neutral foundation and area for us all to continuously improve our ecological footprint by lowering our CO2, land and water footprint.
Yeah, I like it a lot. It's in my mind, it's a much more optimistic and rational approach to reducing your footprint than what I've seen to date. So very welcome in my mind.
Less emotional, more rational.
Yes.
Now that we can have hours of talk about that statement. What works better, right?
Yes, absolutely.
but let's put it this way. Typically, rationalism is a little bit more protected for long-term changes. However, emotions are, of course, a very big driver of day-to-day and short-term behavior and choices.
Absolutely. And I like you mentioned change through society, either being in 20-year blocks or not. You can debate that. You yourself are very keen to change and to evolve. You stated you're on a mission to evolve. Could you tell us a bit more about your philosophy there, and also about how far you take that with some examples?
I mean, let's start with how beautiful evolution is. That we as humans understand the science of evolution. It's just fantastic. And evolution is this great driver of progress. And the very big questions like who are we, where do we come from, how does the world around us work? These are centuries old questions, and they've resulted in physics, astronomy, religion. Right? The outcomes of those questions are very explainable. So if that's true, then I should evolve as well. I mean, it would be insane if somebody would tell me you're exactly the same than 30 years ago. I would be hurt. I hope people see change and experience change. I hope to be also a driver for change for others. So I love to evolve. And the second part is, even though I love to think in blocks as well, like, okay, my years during university, or my 15 years now as an entrepreneur, or now being a husband and a father, there's no block. I mean, it's just continuous. The things, our daughters are 8, 6, and 3. I don't think they're going to experience exact 2 years of differences. Like, they're just going to experience their own waves of changes and inputs and outputs. So to evolve daily is a bit my life value. And the second part is, the old chessboard question: if you have 1 grain of rice and you can double it with every chessboard, I mean, there's an infinite. You can't reach the end. You have more grains of rice in the universe. It's the same like the 1% approach. If I could evolve 1% every day, I'll be my best version whenever. But it doesn't work that way. I degrade 10% sometimes a day as well. So it's rooted in that belief, right? Evolution is beautiful. Everything is a continuum, and you need to be part of that.
Got it. And when you look back at your life, what were key moments of evolution for you?
Marriage, father, sometimes feeling really bad, going to school, succeeding, graduating, failing, breaking a wrist, being far away on a boat without connection. I mean, there are all kinds of moments that have profound changes. Passing away from a grandmother, passing away of a cousin. I mean, this being bullied sometimes, or having a tweet threatening me, putting my private details online, having crazy people linking me to stuff and then asking to dig into it. Those are negatives. The positives are, of course, cutting a deal with a big company because they appreciate the company and the person. Having people joining the team where I think like, okay, you come from such a big company with such a different risk profile. Fantastic honor that you join our team. So there are all kinds of things.
Got it. And any ones in particular that stand out or that were like really made you who you are today?
Literally hundreds. I try to see big stuff in small things. Mm-hmm. By the way, that goes also hand in hand that you can get hit hard by small things, right? So that's why I'm always saying embrace the failures because they're there constantly. It makes it easier to see small successes and emphasize those. But hundreds and thousands. I mean, I can name hundreds of people because of their support and that have been influential and transformational.
And if your goal is to evolve every day, I imagine that mindset also helps you a lot doing that. But do you have ways where you accelerate that and stay open to those changes and think about how you can change? Do you have certain routines, certain mindset that you apply to doing that?
I have very little routines actually, which I need more routines. It's like derivatives, right? Like speed is an outcome of acceleration, right? It's so what is above the water is an outcome of all the floating stuff below the water, and really believing that the change and the evolution itself is what drives resilience and outcome and progress instead of the other way around. This is where I think Tesla got it right. It's the first and I think the most known example. The factory is the product, not the car. It's because if you move the scope to, okay, let's get better in building better factories, then the outcome of that increases more radically, almost exponentially. And that's the same on a personal level, right? It's focusing on changing rather than focusing on what you want to be and then only doing the change to get there. Then I think that's where it starts.
Got it. And in the context of artificial intelligence, I've heard people coin the term speciesist, which means as much as want the human race to have a special place on this planet, and you're not comfortable with sort of handing over the keys to some new form of intelligence or mix of humans and intelligence. As a big believer in evolution and change, would you be comfortable contributing or handing over almost to a new form of intelligence?
I mean, the argument of speciesists that make the link to handing over intelligence is like the dumbest argument that I've ever heard of, because we do it all the time. I put my faith in more intelligent people when I walk in a hospital. I put my faith in more intelligent people that hopefully create institutions and government structures for the benefit of society and not just for me. Like on I put my faith in the policeman that is more intelligent than other people to de-escalate situations of violence. I put my faith in so many people that are, and then you can ask your question, yeah, but their intelligence is now also more and more dependent on technology and means of communication. Okay, so what? I mean, if a species uses that argument, I would say, let's ask them to solve all their own problems themselves. There is no such thing as not trusting other people's and other systems' intelligence. If you do that, you have a miserable life. So intelligence and trust and systems and people, I think eventually are also, again, part of a continuum, right? Like we have always been able to basically outsmart ourselves and out-innovate ourselves. Like we're outsmarting disease in many ways. Like we're outsmarting aging in many ways. Like and it's not just people. We used tools of analytics. I mean, Excel. I don't think there are a lot of people in finance that can live without Excel these days. Now, is Excel smarter than the old pen and calculator? I don't know. It's a far better tool. Okay, now there could be this singular moment, right? Like let's say there is indeed a form of intelligence that is better at reasoning. To be very honest, there's of course a lot of reasoning going on that is better than others or humans can do. I just hope, again, we will use it to our benefit, to advance society, to advance the well-being of people, to make our lives better. But maybe it's the same argument in the end. If we pull that off, humans have a better life. Now, what's wrong with that? I don't know.
I like that a lot.
It's all born from fear. Like fear is a bad
That's a large part of it.
Would I be jealous if there is a piece of software that literally can think in everything better than I can do? Does it make it very personal? Okay. I would maybe get less eager to learn and less eager to read books and try to comprehend it and transform into my own ideas. Would I find it annoying if let's say AGI intelligence gets better at ideas and becomes the best idea engine in the world? Probably.
But equally, it would change your and everybody else's life for the better.
Yeah, hopefully. Yeah. And so it's
hopefully
it can be very transformational for the way we operate. But yeah, maybe it solves other problems more quickly than we can do. Like we're talking about avoiding wars and solving wealth disparities for decades, and we're not very good at it yet. So maybe there should be something more intelligent than we are. So I don't know. At least from a speciesist angle, I don't follow that argument.
Okay. Great. That's clear, and I like that a lot. Thanks, Kees. Kees, as we near the end of this conversation, what do you hope people will take away from this conversation? And do you have any last words to end on?
If you finish this entire podcast, you've spent more than an hour of your life listening to this podcast. That's a big investment. So it's like reading a book, listening to podcasts. If only one idea came from it, then it's already a success.
Amazing. Thanks, Kees. It was a real pleasure speaking to you. Thanks you, and thanks to the Protix team for everything you've achieved. Thanks for being open. Thanks for sharing your thoughts openly. Much appreciated, and I know the audience will enjoy that a lot. Thanks a lot.
All right. Thank you all.